Hi Phil, thanks for making contact and thank you for the footage for this online lesson. Your priority and the main area that I want you to be working on is actually relating to your downswing more than anything else. Excuse me. However, before I get into the nitty gritty of that, what I'd like to do is just briefly outline a few areas that I would like you to consider and just play around with when you're practicing during this lockdown period in regards to P1 setup all the way to P4, top of the backswing. As with somebody who, well, anybody who's worked with Sam, I'd expect them to have a really good grounding in regards to the system. Really good guy, quality coach. He's done some good groundwork with you at this stage, albeit in a couple of lessons. So every credit to you both in regards to that. Love the way you stand to it. One little tweak, one little tweak that leads to another little change I would make its setup is in regards to your right hand grip. So the first thing I would have you do, P1, is I would just strengthen the right hand grip a little bit. So here you can see the sort of V form between the thumb and index finger is, generally speaking, pointing somewhere between your chin and your lead shoulder. And what I'd like to do is bring that around so that it points a little bit more between your chin and your trail shoulder. So that's going to feel a little bit strange, but what that's going to do is it's going to help bring this right forearm back, right shoulder back, and soften this right forearm a little bit. So a slightly stronger trail hand grip is just going to put that trail elbow and trail shoulder in a slightly more appropriate position, which will help you in regards to the way you take the club away. So with the right hand grip that you've got, there is a tendency to, and the right arm being very straight, so those two things are linked in. You can play around with that even without a club. If you really weaken that right hand, you can see that the trail arm, the right arm straightens and pronates, so sort of twists anti-clockwise as you're looking at it. And if you strengthen the right hand grip, you can see the right arm wants to soften, the right shoulder wants to pull back. So this wants to work this way a little bit more. This wants to work this way. The trail arm tends to supinate or soften, which is a rotation clockwise in regards to the trail arm. And that's a much more appropriate position for getting the club to go back in the preferred manner. So a little bit of a tweak to your grip at P1. What that's going to then help with is the move that you make from P1 to P2. So keeping the weight forward, changing the flex in the knees, getting the shoulder to work down is all good stuff. But you've got too much too soon. So the trail leg should straighten gradually and incrementally from P1 to P4. Your trail leg straightens way too much from P1 setup to P2 shaft parallel, and then 2.5, so just between shaft parallel and left arm parallel. So this trail leg now is completely straightened. If you look at the head from face on goes up and forward, which is a sign that you're extending too much too soon while side bending a little bit too much too soon. The side bend is coming from the lead leg flexing, so the knees changing flex, right leg straightening, left leg flexing. The right leg straightening is the extension. The left leg flexing is the shoulder down, which is the side bend, is why your head goes up and forward as you take the club back from P1 to 2.5. It's also why the club sets so flat, which gives a little bit too much depth to the top of your backswing, which is why you mentioned about the swing looking a little bit too short. So just a little bit of food for thought. Remember that during the backswing, you know, the knees do change flex, but just to give you some vague numbers on this, these are not definitive numbers, by the way, but just to sort of picture things in your mind. If at P1 we've got let's say 25 degrees of flex in the trail leg. P1 to P2, that trail leg should straighten by 7 degrees. So we'll go from 25 to 18. From 2 to 3, we go from 18 to 11. So another 7 degrees. From 3 to 4, we go from 11 to 4, another 7 degrees. So the right leg, the trail leg, is straightening gradually and incrementally from P1 to P4. In your case, the trail leg straightens severely from P1 to P2.5, which is why you can see that sort of, whether this is something you're aware of and you feel, or when you look at your swing on camera, you're drawn to it straight away. You have that funny little raising of the trail leg early in the backswing. The right shoulder comes up really quick. The pelvis is almost like tucking under during the backswing. You see that? Very unusual. As the pelvis tucks under during the backswing, see how it levels out. So pelvic tilt at P1, butt would be touching an imaginary wall. Tucks under and levels. So the pelvis is tucked under. It's come away from the wall, which is pushing the sweet spot out towards the golf ball, which is shifting the swing's direction out to the right. So that's a long way to improving your push that you struggle with on occasion. Whenever a swing is directed too much to the right, the low point tends to be too far back. The approach into the ball is a little bit too shallow. You do have other things in relation to that I want to now talk about, however, in the downswing. So just some food for thought at setup. Strengthening the right hand grip a little bit to impact the trail shoulder and trail arm. Make the takeaway a little bit easier to manage. And then during the takeaway, make sure that the right leg and left leg are changing flex gradually rather than tons going in really early and then everything's just deep and behind you and a little bit shorter looking. Just throws the tilt out considerably. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little demonstration that I was doing the other day for another online student up alongside your face on footage, and then spend some time talking about what I actually want you to focus on in regards to the downswing. Okay, so during the downswing, now this is very, very pertinent to the quality of strike that you're asking about during your description on Messenger. The body's going to work towards the target, and the arms have to try and keep up with the body. So you are, when you've worked with Sam, you've possibly been introduced to what we call the accumulators, which are basically things during the swing. Think about lever mechanism almost. Things like bending the right arm, straightening the right arm, that's accumulator 1. Moving the left arm away from the right shoulder, which is accumulator 4, which is very important in regards to yourself. Accumulator 2, which is the wrist hinging motion. I've no doubt that Sam has at some point introduced you to that. If not, we'll elaborate further during this session. So during the downswing, accumulator 1, I'm going to demonstrate this for you here. Sorry, accumulator 4 is the movement of the left arm away from the right shoulder, like I'm demonstrating there. Accumulator 1 is the straightening of the right arm. So during the downswing, the left arm is continuously trying to move away from the right shoulder, and the right arm is continuously trying to straighten. Now we've got to manage both of those things. And if we manage both of those things, the radius of the swing is controlled and it is much easier to strike the ball consistently. So when I look at your downswing, what I see is a player who is releasing accumulator 1, which is the trail arm, very quickly. So you can imagine your trail arm, when you look at this from down the line, you'll see your trail arm has a bend in it at P4 of about 45 degrees. And it starts to straighten out very quickly. You can see there now almost perfectly straight as it's coming into about P6.5. Now your lead arm doesn't really move away from the trail shoulder anywhere near quick enough. So it is moving away, but the rate at which it's moving away, if you can sort of picture this three-dimensionally, is not keeping up with the rate at which the right arm straightens. And that's giving a general sort of look of your right arm. If you think about your right arm thrust is almost directly towards the golf ball. So again, this is not a definitive line, but it's like from the top of the swing, you're driving the hands towards the ball. Now when accumulator 1, the right arm, starts to activate too quick, the arc gets too wide, so the butt of the club is too far away from the trail thigh at this point. So ideally, if your left arm was moving away from the trail shoulder faster, your trail arm would not straighten quite as quick, and the butt of the club would be more in the middle of the trail thigh as you get to P6. Now that means that the radius is tighter and the release point of the club is further forward, it's more on top of the golf ball. Yours is too wide and it's too far away from the golf ball, so consequently you're going to be coming in really shallow, low to the ground, rather than coming in steeper, hitting down on the golf ball, hitting the ground out in front of the golf ball. When the right arm straightens out too quick, the wrist angles start to get dumped. So again, that's another widening component which is making contact more difficult to control. So the lower the club is coming into the ground, especially if you allied that to a very right shifted swing that we looked at because of what you do in the backswing, we talked about that in the first segment of this lesson, you know, running the risk of really struggling with your contact, especially when you get to your longer fairway clubs and the ball position isn't as far back, which doesn't tend to, you know, disguise these faults. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a comparison up of myself demonstrating what happens when you straighten the right arm too much too soon without engaging the left arm versus engaging both arms in a more appropriate manner, and it should shed some light onto the type of thing that I want you to work on. Okay, so what I'm going to demonstrate on the right is the incorrect move, which is, as you're looking at these three swings, it's like the center swing, versus an extreme example of the preferred move, which is the one on the right, alongside your own action. So from P4, what we've already explained is that you tend to want to drive the hands at the ball a little bit too much. P6, which we just miss out on here, is a little bit too wide. So I'm just going to put some lines on here to indicate where P6 would be. If we were just a frame or so further on, left arm would be a little bit more here. Right arm would be pretty straight. Shaft of the club parallel. So you can see there the release point, which is the butt of the club at P6, would be a good 8 inches behind the golf ball. And the overall impression we get from here is that we're driving the hands sort of directly at the golf ball throughout the downswing. It's difficult to sort of 100% get that across with a straight line on a 2D image, but you get the idea. So it's almost like, right, okay, I've took the club back, let's get this club and get the hands back to the ball. That's what I'm trying to hit. So that's what I'm going to try and do. So I'm going to try and drive everything. That right arm thrust is directed at the golf ball, which is pretty evident when you look at that image there. Okay, I'm just going to take you back now to just before P6. I'm going to demonstrate the same sort of thing now here. So if the ball was hitting, I'm making a swing with about a 6-iron there, so if the ball was in the sort of 6-iron position, then what I'm going to do on this one now is I'm going to drive the hands towards that golf ball. You can see as I do that, right arm starts to straighten, wrist angles start to come out. P6, very similar to what we're seeing with yourself. Okay, now obviously the body, I'm not working the pivot on these are passive moves, just to demonstrate what's happening with accumulator 4. That's the lead arm moving away from the trail shoulder, and accumulator 1, which is the straightening in the downswing of the trail arm. So you can see the right arm is straightening, but the left arm is not necessarily moving forward very much, and it certainly isn't moving away from my shoulder enough. Now what I'm going to demonstrate on the right is more of what I want you to feel. Now this will look familiar to you because there's a couple of players, Tommy Fleetwood and Justin Rose, spring straight to mind, who have been really sort of emphasising this move during their pre-shot routine, where it's sort of really, you can see them engaging the arms, trying to keep the arms up with the torso, etc. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to feel like, and this is a good image for you, this is what I want you to try and sort of think about when you're hitting golf balls. We want the hands to be driven from P4 to impact diagonally across the front of you. So not straight down to the golf ball, but more diagonally in front of you. Okay, you'll get a better visual for that when you're actually stood in front of a golf ball, because you can monitor what the hands are doing. So the hands follow a certain trajectory during the downswing. The right arm is thrusting, the left arm is moving away from the right shoulder, and that thrust wants to be directed diagonally across the front of you, ahead of the ball, as opposed to straight down towards the golf ball. And when you do that, it starts to look more like this. As you can see, the left arm moving away from the right shoulder and the right arm straightening. Now when you do that, the wrist angles are maintained more. It's clear that the lead arm is moving away from the trail shoulder quicker. And that allows you to maintain the wrist angles. But more importantly, the radius of the swing, which is the lead shoulder to the base of the club, is much tighter. So I'm just going to have to elongate the screen a little bit here for you. Unfortunately, that won't allow me to do it. Just bear with me. You can see, look, I mean, you get the idea anyway. I can't quite get the whole of this image on for you. Perhaps if I shrink it a little bit, there we go. The arc's that wide, it won't even fit on the screen. So the radius is considerably wider during this swing. That will be out there somewhere than on this one. The butt of the club is much more advanced at P6. So as these angles in the wrists start to come out and the club starts to approach an inline condition with the left arm, the chances of hitting the ground behind the ball are reduced dramatically. And again, that's going to help you long term with your contact. So very much in your case, swing gets too wide too soon. Left arm isn't active enough. Right arm is too active. And the reason for that is because you're thinking about driving these hands at the ball, whereas you should be thinking about driving the hands diagonally across the front of you this way. Now, an excellent drill for that, I'm just going to get rid of all those lines for you, is to swing to the top. It's going to take you to P6. And we're going to concentrate predominantly on this one now on the right. So hitting shots in the net, swing to P4 and stop. And then try to get the butt of the club or the hands in line with the belt buckle before the shaft gets parallel with the ground. So P4, stop. So this would be like your pre-shot. Butt of the club in line with the belt buckle before the shaft or as the shaft gets parallel with the ground. Left arm has to move away from the right shoulder to do that. Right arm has to straighten, but straighten diagonally across the front of you. And the wrist angles have to be maintained. So accumulator 4, left arm, accumulator 1, right arm, and accumulator 2, the wrist angles have to work in a more appropriate manner, which is allowing you to control the strike of the golf ball, and is evident in every good ball striker in varying degrees that plays the game. So that's one drill. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get one of my clients up demonstrating another drill that worked a treat, and again you can see the difference in his overall ability to deliver the club in a more appropriate manner. So I'll just get that up for you now. Okay, so here we've got a gentleman who visited me who had a tendency to just drift off the ball a little bit, as you can see here, and his comment was that I cannot get the butt of the club onto my trail leg during the downswing before P6 or at P6. So what we did was we removed the golf ball out of the equation, we folded up a golf towel, and we got him to put his golf club on the front edge of the towel at P1. So it was on the front edge of the towel with the club at P1, and then he was asked to hit the ground in front of the towel. So basically just miss the towel. You can see straight away during the backswing, his tendency to want to drift off started to reduce without him really thinking about it, because we hadn't spoke about that at this point. We were just talking about his downswing. But his movement in the downswing changed dramatically. So this is another drill. You've got a feel that you can use when you're in the net, and you've got a little exercise that you can do. When you do this exercise, if you get a chance, could you film it and send it across to me? I'd like to see film of you doing both drills, just so that I know you're doing it right, and if we need to, we can tweak it accordingly. I'll just play this through. So his comment was, I cannot get the butt of the club on the trail leg at P6. He will start moving very shortly, I would hope. There we go, just putting a few lines on. Commenting that he's a little bit more centered. So this is his original move down. Very similar to what we see with yourself. Release point too far back. The swing on the right is his first attempt at the drill. Bingo. So it's not that he can't do it. It's just that he's not really appreciating what's required to do it. Instead of the hands driving towards the golf ball, they're trying to drive out in front of the golf ball, and you can see even on the one on the right, he still clipped the towel a little bit. But overall, a much improved looking delivery position, and one that's very appropriate to yourself and your progression in regards to striking the golf ball more consistently. If you've got any questions, just feel free to drop me a line on Messenger if you want to send any swings. Again, use that facility to do so, and if you can get a chance to get me a little bit of footage from face on and down the line of the little grip tweak that we talked about, and also the movements that we've just discussed and the two drills that we just discussed, that'd be great, just so that we know you get off to the right on the right footing straight away, and you can make some progress as fast as possible. Thanks very much, good luck, and if you've got any questions, feel free to drop me a line.